What's up guys, welcome back. If you're new to my channel, hi, I'm Morgan. I'm a UX designer in the financial services industry. I make videos talking about my career change to UX design, how you can change your career as well, and the pain of existence. If that kind of content interests you, please make sure to hit subscribe. So it's nighttime while I'm recording, so I have only artificial lighting, so if the video hurts your eyes, I apologize. So I just wanted to make this because I had the honor today of helping interview a candidate for a UX design role. And I've made videos in the past giving interview tips and portfolio presentation tips and everything, but I feel like now that I've been on the other side of the interview, I can offer a bit more credibility to my advice, as well as explain what the interviewer is actually thinking when you might make some of these mistakes. I want to make this clear. None of this reflects on what the candidate did today. They were lovely. This is about how I would interview and thinking now that I've been on the interviewer's side of things, thinking about all the things that I used to do and how that must have come across to people, I understand why I didn't get a call back. I've said a few times that the day I started treating interviews more like a conversation was the days I started getting called back. Let's just get right into the tips. Tip number one, I've said this before, but it's okay to take a breath and let the interviewer know that you just want a second to collect your thoughts. You're nervous, you want to make sure that you answer the question in full. So if someone asks you a question and then you answer too quickly, you don't give yourself a second to think about it, it may come across as you're a little bit scattered. You aren't giving the question enough thought. Sometimes there are those questions where it's you ask them, they're oh yeah, of course, and they have an answer right away because it's something that's top of mind. But if someone asks you a really deep question, I would expect you to take a pause to think about it. That's what would happen in a conversation. You'd be that's a good question. And then you take a second and you think, and that's fine. That's how conversation works. But if someone asks you a question, you answer too quickly, sometimes you dig yourself a hole and you might end up fabricating stories, or you start going on a tangent and you can't get back to the root of the question because you don't remember because you're so nervous and you've talked yourself into this hole. And then you get more nervous and so take a breath, think about what you want to say. People are going to not only understand that, but expect that. My next tip connects to that. Don't fabricate stories. You're going to dig yourself into a hole. You're going to get more nervous. They might ask you questions asking you to elaborate. I remember one time I lied about knowing how to use a tool. I thought that I knew enough about it to be conversational, but then when they asked me how I implemented it into a project, I just totally blanked and I was like, I've never actually used it. Didn't get that job, so I'm happy with where I am now, but I just thought that I needed to fluff up my resume, which is one of the worst things you can do. So don't fabricate stories. If you don't have a story for a question that they ask, tell me about a time that you XYZ, if you don't have a story that matches that, you can say well, I've never been put in that situation, but if I were, this is how I imagine I would go about things. You can be honest, because that's, it's a human thing. They can't expect you to have a story for every single question that they ask. It's fine. Now, it's different if you're saying that to every question. So, then I'm just going to think you don't have any experience at all, if it's actually relevant. Because sometimes the questions will be a little abstract, tell me about a time that you couldn't meet a deadline or something like that. It's well, I've met every deadline, or, something like that. Or oh, well, place I worked, the deadlines weren't super strict, so we were more focused on quality, You could say stuff like that. You don't have to come up with a story or fit a sort of irrelevant story to match their question. It's okay. And that is my next tip, is that there's no rules to questions. There's no check boxes that they're making sure your story lines up or anything like that. don't make yourself nervous trying to fit your answers to their questions. Like, if they ask about an experience, just talk about that experience, like as if you're talking to a friend. I know it's easier said than done because there's interview nerves and everything, but like, just relax a little bit. Not everything has to be so professional. Like, you can have emotions, you can talk about how you felt. If you're making it far enough into an interview where you're meeting a potential coworker, like the situation I was in, it's time to start like letting your guard down a little bit and show who you are as a person, because you're going to be working with these people and we want to know how you are. You know, we want to know what it's like to work with you. But if you're giving memorized answers or things that just sounds like you're like checking off a list, it's a little cold. Something that I used to do a lot was recite memorized answers, which the day I stopped doing that is the day I started getting job offers. My next tip is just to keep things simple, you know, like rein it in a little bit, you know, because sometimes you can go off on a tangent and you get further and further away from the question, which also makes it difficult when the meetings are time constrained. So do your best to just like keep your eye on like what the question was, answer it, and ask if you want, if they want you to elaborate on it at all, but like don't overshare, because it can, once again, it's like another thing that you might think that you appear scattered from ranting, then you get nervous, so you keep ranting more, and then you realize that you're making things confusing, so then you try to over-explain, and then you continue to get further away from the question. Practice answering things concisely. This next tip is more tactical. If you're going to present a case study, don't present it from your portfolio. I recommend making a presentation for the company that you want to work at. So for example, I had 2 case studies in my presentation. So I had emailed my recruiter, I said, what do the interviewers want to see? Like, what's the goal? What's the point of the case study presentation? And he said something along the lines of, they want to see how you work in a team, and they want to see what your results and outcomes are. So I never worked in a team, and I had never done a real project. So what I wound up doing was I had done a design jam once, and I worked with a partner. And so for the first like quarter of the presentation, I talked about that case study, not so much about the outcomes, it was more about the experience of the design jam, what it was like working with another person, how we communicated, dealing with someone who lives in another place when we had a really tough deadline. And then the like 75% of my presentation was about this case study that it was a financial app that I had designed, so it went with the company. I talked about my design process, but then what I really focused on was this one part of my case study. I've talked about this before, but I had struggled with the onboarding process, which was essential to the app. I focused on that in my presentation. I talked about the process that I went through, all the back and forth, the iterating, testing, revising, and I showed them the app unfinished. And I talked about what outcomes I would look for if this were to be launched, like what actual quantitative and qualitative results would I see from users. So that's what I did. I did what they wanted to see. And it showed that I put a lot of effort into it. And it showed that like I listened. I asked, what do they want to see? And then I applied it. But I reused that presentation for other interviews. So it's not that you have to tailor it to the company, but if they want to see something specific, then those are points that you should highlight. So just reading something off of your portfolio, then, you know, it's just, you can get lost. It can go on a little too long. It can be difficult to practice. It can be difficult to highlight certain points because case studies on your portfolio are meant to be read, while presentations are meant to be like viewed. Lastly, I really recommend that you reflect on your career, your goals, and what you ultimately hope to achieve, as well as like what your values are in a company, in design. What do you hope to do with your career? You got to think about all that before you go into the interview, because if you go in and you're just like, well, I'll do whatever you want, like some places might like that, but that's probably not a place you want to work. You want to work at a place that will help you grow, but you need to have like a general idea of what direction you want to grow in. Someone had asked me, like, where do you want to be by the time you retire? And I'm like, UX is always changing. I know I want to go up, but I don't know where, because like there's constantly new roles opening up. Like I might want to go into strategy, like the more I'm learning about it. But what I do know is that I want to mentor younger designers and potentially go into being a college professor for UX design one day. And that was my honest answer, that like I knew that what I wanted to do was help other people. And like, so that's something, but you can't go into a job interview not knowing what you want, because what are they supposed to do for you, you know? So you should think about that before you go into your job interview. Like that's maybe one of those questions where if someone asks you like, where do you want to be in 5 years? That's probably one where it's okay to be like, I know exactly what I want to do, because you should be thinking about it. You're interviewing for jobs. It should be top of mind. So remember, it's not just them interviewing you, you're interviewing them. We're making sure that we're a good fit. And by putting effort into seeing if you're a good fit, it makes you a more attractive candidate. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just like talking at someone instead of like conversing with someone that I will have to work with. So those are all things to think about. If you're interviewing, best of luck to you. Yeah, I hope you guys found this video helpful. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.